drives it to right. This one's on a line to the warning track, to the wall. It's gone. Oh, and Robbie Big Fly has number one. A 3-run home run for Rob Calabrese. In the season of first, the Wisconsin Rapids Rafters are officially your Northwoods League South Division first half champions. The Rafters Pregame on WFHR 1320 AM, WFHR.com. And, of course, the TuneIn Radio app. This is Cooper Perkins, joined by Sam Jellinek. Sam, how are you?
Doing fantastic. A little rain earlier today, but let's play some baseball now, shall we?
Well, Mother Nature looks a little bit friendlier as we come down the stretch before our 7:05 first pitch for the first game of a 2-game set with the Rafters and the Kalamazoo Growlers. It is the final regular season home series for the Rafters. It has been a remarkable season at large. It has been a remarkable season at home, and last night was no exception.
Just more Woodward magic, wasn't it? A game that the Rafters really didn't belong in, a game that they probably shouldn't have won, but it's a game that winning teams win. They found a way to battle, stay in it throughout, and pull out a win in the end.
For those of you who weren't along for the ride with us last night, the Rafters came back from down 3-2 in the bottom of the 9th inning to first tie the game in the 9th and then walk off on a single from Richie Palacios in the bottom of the 10th inning as they went to 8-0 against the Wisconsin Woodchucks, a perfect mark. I dug through the record books this afternoon out of curiosity and came to find that in no prior series had the Rafters swept an opponent across an entire season. So you're looking at things like interdivisional series where there are only 4 games. There were a couple instances of 2-game series, but neither of those situations and any other had the Rafters gone undefeated against a single opponent in a single season. So yet another record broken in this season of first. So they're still in first place all by themselves. The Madison Mallards last night lost on a 2-run home run in the late innings by the Wilmer Stingers. So they dropped down another game behind the Rafters. That's now a 2.5-game lead for the second half with just, for the Rafters, 5 to play and for the Mallards, 4 to play. Overall for the Rafters, a 3.5-game lead when you factor in the first half finish of a 1-game advantage on the Mallards. So things are coming down the stretch. We're starting to settle in spots 1 through 3. The Rafters look pretty locked in for spot number 1, the Mallards for spot number 2, and the Battle Creek Bombers, who the Rafters will see this weekend on the road, for spot number 3. But the question mark still with the 4th spot, the Lakeshore Chinooks, Wisconsin Woodchucks, and Green Bay Bullfrogs, all still in the discussion. The Chinooks and the Battle Creek Bombers last night were suspended, so they'll finish off their game from last night tonight and then play an additional one. So we'll know a little bit more about those two clubs after tonight comes and goes. There will be 2 more games in the standings, so to speak. The Wisconsin Woodchucks, though, after last night, seemed to be out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was that may have been the final nail in the coffin for the Woodchucks. They've been struggling as of late, really scuffling. But going into the second half, they started off pretty hot after a dismal end to the first half. Came out streaking, looked as if they might have a final push in them, but the past couple games have just not gone their way. Unfortunately, they have not had a win against the Rafters all year, and they happen to play the Rafters at the worst possible time.
We talked a bit about this yesterday and the potential matchups and which is favorable, which is not. At this stage, I think we're looking at either the Green Bay Bullfrogs or the Lakeshore Chinooks. They both present problems in their own ways. In both scenarios, the Rafters have had at least moderate success. A season split with the Bullfrogs, the Rafters taking 6 out of 8 with the Chinooks. But then there's a little bit of an asterisk maybe because we know Marshall Kozowski would pitch that game 1, and he is hands down the best starting pitcher in the league.
Yeah, it's extremely odd that both times the Rafters have faced Kozowski, they haven't beaten him, but they've beaten the Chinooks, which is the best way to put it. He's absolutely dominated the Rafters through his 2 starts against them, yet the Rafters seem to come out on top somehow. What that really means is the Rafters have figured out how to beat the Chinooks. They realize, you know what, if we can't beat Kozowski for 6, let's let him strike us out, work some deep counts.
It hasn't been limited to the Chinooks, though. Yeah. This is a Rafters team that has made a living out of beating bullpens and outlasting strong starters to come out and beat those latter inning pitchers and make their living against the guys who are in the bullpen. So this has been a common theme all season long. It's another manifestation, but it's been a theme that has really been the driving force between this team's quest for 50 wins. We talked a little bit about this before coming on the air. The Rafters have 46 wins with 5 games to play. Should they win out, they would tie the Northwoods League single-season wins record of 51. If they were to go 4-1, they would still crack the ever-so-elite 50-win club and become only the 3rd team to do it in Northwoods League history, which would be nothing short of outstanding. But it's instances like those games against Marshall Kozowski where they dig deep, find a way to win in the late innings, and it showed up again last night against the Woodchucks.
Not all wins are really created equal in some ways. Sometimes you blow a team out. Sometimes it's a 1-run win where you squeak it out that you really had no business winning. That was the game last night for the Rafters. The game before, they absolutely dominated the Woodchucks in all facets of the game and came away with a win. And that's what this team does. They know how to win in every single possible way. There's just not one simple formula that they always use.
And one thing to note, as we look down the final stretch and we maybe fantasize a little bit about the possibility of the Rafters coming up with that 5-game finish and finishing with 51 wins, they're in a 7-game winning streak currently. So that would mean finishing on a 12-game winning streak, which would far and away be the longest in franchise history and would be the longest in the Northwoods League this season. So just the law of averages isn't really in their favor to win those last 5 games simply because they've won the previous 7. But we'll talk more about the Rafters and the Growlers when we come back. For now, we're going to take a quick timeout as you're listening to Rafters Pregame on WFHR 1320 AM, WFHR.com, and the TuneIn Radio app. More when we come back. Welcome back to Whitterfield, Rafters Pregame. Cooper Perkins and Sam Jellinek as we talk about the Rafters, the Growlers, the final finish of this season. But tonight, we have a couple of starting pitchers who have vastly different experiences. You have Jay Smith for the Growlers, who has hardly thrown at all this season, and then you have Gareth Stroh for the Rafters, who is slated to make his team-leading 11th start this year. Sam, what have you seen in your pregame research to look into these two guys to really try and get an expectation for tonight's ballgame?
Gareth has just been absolutely phenomenal as of late. He's been a guy every single time you can expect 6 innings, maybe 1 or 2 runs, barely walks anybody, which is a which is a very big way for him to, with his repertoire, to be able to dominate other teams. As for Jay Smith, it has just been a very rough go of it.
Well, you mentioned how Gareth Stroh has pitched of late and that he's dominated. He's won his last 2 decisions, that coming over 3 starts. He went 6 innings each of his last 2 outings, which has been an important note for him. When he's been able to last into ball games, it shows that he's been able to command his breaking pitches because he's basically pitching backwards the 3rd time through the order. He's a guy that does not have an overpowering fastball. He doesn't really have a plus pitch, so to speak, but he does a good job throwing all of his pitches for strikes for the most part. It's about the quality of strikes for Gareth Stroh, though. Not all strikes are created equal. Sometimes, sending one down the middle, in the lower half maybe, might be a decent pitch, but it's not the kind of strike that he's looking for. As John Halama, the Rafters pitching coach, says constantly to these guys, it's about throwing pitches that have the appearance of a strike that do not, in fact, end up in the strike zone.
We saw it earlier this year when Gareth went through a little bit of a rough patch. It was that he was throwing too many strikes, and not enough of them were quality. He was getting ahead of guys, but when he was leaving pitches out over the middle of the plate. They were being absolutely blasted over the left field wall.
Well, you mentioned Jay Smith on the other side with the Kalamazoo Growlers, and I want to take a moment to look at the Growlers as a whole. This is a team that has had nothing short of a miserable second half of the season. They were very formidable in the first half. They were in that number 3 spot at the end of the first half. They're just 12-20 in the second half of the season. They've lost some major players. B.J. Butler's one that comes to mind. He was an all-star and nothing short of phenomenal in the first half. What has made this team struggle to the extent that they have?
Just a real lack of starting pitching so far. I mean, no offense to Jay Smith at all, but looking at his numbers and what he's done so far this year, he's not a guy that you would exactly pick to say, here's the ball, go and beat the best team in the league right now. And you look up and down their entire starting pitching staff, they currently only total about half of the starts that the whole team has made this entire year. So there's been a lot of turnover, and a lot of guys have been asked to start games that you really wouldn't expect.
Well, they do still have one outstanding arm. I'm thinking of Devin Pauline, who has been excellent for the Growlers all season long. He was selected to both the Northwoods League All-Star Team and the Major League Dream Showcase. He is an exceptional talent out of Nova Southeastern. He will not be on the mound tonight. We don't know about tomorrow night yet. The Rafters have announced their starter. It'll be Jake Repovich, but we do not know for the Growlers. I don't expect it to be Devin Pauline. It looks as though they're saving him for the final weekend. But for the Rafters, it's been a different story on their side when you look at the pitching. Their starting pitching has been a bit streaky, so it hasn't been consistently as poor maybe as the Growlers have shown in the second half, but it also hasn't been all bread and beer. There's been some struggle for the Rafters, but they've been picked up by their bullpen consistently, and last night was another example.
Oh yeah, Blair Laxo coming out of the pen, and John Jager, everybody forgets about the 2 1/3 or 2 2/3 that he ended up throwing was an absolute key to get it to Blair for the 9th. And then Reed Stumpf, a great addition to the Rafters, has kind of filled that Cameron Busby role, as we've talked about, of a little bit of a sidearm delivery, a little bit of weird stuff, and uses that very well to be able to get outs.
I talked to Reed about it this morning, and he was saying that he got a chance to talk to Buzz a little bit before Busby departed, and got an idea for what the role is about and kind of how he's approached things, understanding that Cameron Busby had a very, very nice summer for the Rafters. He'd been an all-star. He dominated by and large, with maybe just the exception of Green Bay, a team that just so happened to have his number. But outside of that, he was dominant, and Stumpf does a lot of the same things. Fastball, slider, low 80s. He's a little bit harder than Busby is. He's also not as severe from the bottom. So he's a guy that when he's hitting his spots can be exceptionally difficult to hit one time through the order. He's a guy that can give you 2-3 innings. But outside of that, that's where things begin to get a little bit shakier, and you might be playing with some fire.
Yeah, the Rafters bullpen on the backside is extremely deep, but when the starting pitchers don't give them enough, and John Jager's not exactly available to go 3, 4, maybe even 5 innings, that's where the Rafters run into trouble, and that's where almost every team runs into a little bit of trouble. But for the Rafters, they've been so good at patching innings 6, 7, 8, and 9 together, it really hasn't been a problem.
Well, the Rafters and the Growlers coming up just after our timeout. Gareth Stroh and Jay Smith, as the two clubs will do battle for the 7th time this season. You've been listening to Rafters Pregame with Cooper Perkins and Sam Jellinek. For the two of us, we say thank you. As soon as we come back, we'll have first pitch on WFHR 1320 AM, WFHR.com, and the Tune In Radio app.